Bread, I can smell. You can't smell it because it's video, but there must be a factory around here. Because I got a smell of it. Willesden Junction, like lovely bread or biscuits or something.
I can smell bread. I can smell bread.
Yeah, there's got to be a factory around here. That's stronger than any bakery.
Do you think that's a sign of things to come? Hello, you're with Calling All Stations and
Victoria Hastings.
So we're on our way to next.
I don't know, because you didn't tell me. You said walk this way. I was going to say, is it Wembley? Because there is a stadium over there.
Yeah.
Kind of gave it away.
But first, let's catch you up with where we've already been. Station 72 is monolithic Westminster. This is another one of the Jubilee Line extension stations done properly. From every viewpoint, this station looks fantastic, with escalators and walkways appearing on a seemingly never-ending set of levels. Next up is Finsbury Park, and you may remember I purposefully skipped this station way back in video 1 as I knew I'd be here later in the year. Well, I'm here a little earlier than planned to catch a bus up to the Model Railway exhibition at Alexandra Palace. And we continue to tick off the big guns as I visit Stratford to do some needs-must shopping at my least favourite place in London. It's got better since the Olympics, but this is still a nightmare interchange. No, sorry Stratford, I just don't like you. A walk from the Cat Cafe at Bethnal Green brings us to Stepney Green. Then Liverpool Street. And finally, though sadly obscured by scaffolding, I pay a visit to one of the great tube station pubs at Baker Street. We make a start today at Wealdstone Junction, 2 stops north of where the Bakerloo line joins the Watford DC lines from Euston. This marks the start of some 2.5 miles of sprawling rail yard, depot and workspace between here and Stonebridge Park. Situated in an industrial part of town, modern Willesden Junction was built in 1912 and is an important and complex rail hub and connects the Watford DC lines with the North and West London radial routes above. Access from the West Coast Main Line to the Great Western Main Line can also be found to the south of the junction, next to the equally sizable Old Oak Common depot. Though the size of this complex is comparable to that at Stratford or Clapham Junction, Willesden in fact has a relatively simple platform layout. It's easier to think of Willesden Junction as 2 separate stations, with 2 high-level platforms servicing the North and West London Overground lines and 2 low-level platforms for the Bakerloo and Watford DC route. This is accompanied by a 5th, lesser-used south-facing bay, also accessible from the North London line. The station here naturally used to be much larger and was originally accompanied by an older mainline station on the West Coast route, first constructed in 1866. This would have at one point added a further 9 platforms to the bustling complex. Come the 1960s, however, the mainline station had become dilapidated and was only being served by 28 regular trains a day. In 1962, the mainline station was demolished to allow for track realignment in the electrification of the West Coast Main Line. Very little of this part of the station still remains. We could stay here and talk about Willesden's history all day, but with stations to collect, we head off on foot to Harlesden.
McVitie's biscuits, we discovered the source of the smell. It smells like freshly baked cake or bread, or that's obviously what's happening. I'm surprised because I didn't realise there'd still be factories so close to central London, really, because you think
it's quite nice, but I think, like you say, if you live around here you get a bit sick of it.
It would keep making me hungry all the time. I'd wake up in the morning like I really want a biscuit.
To the west of a link to the North London line and east of the Willesden Brent sidings lies Harlesden. During the late BR era in the 90s, this route had become known as the Harlequin line. Details of how this came about are hazy, but it is thought to have been derived from a combination of Harlesden and Queen's Park, after a naming competition run by Network South East. Others have suggested that the inclusion of Harlesden was merely a happy coincidence, and that the name is actually rooted in Harrow, Willesden and Queen's Park. Either way, I think you'll agree the modern Watford DC line's name is boring in comparison. Briefly branching away from the West Coast Main Line, the Watford route crosses over the North Circular into Stonebridge Park. This was, for a short spell in the 1980s, the operational terminus of the Bakerloo, an accolade which has been shared with Queen's Park, Harrow and Wealdstone and Watford Junction throughout its history. The station here has had a troubled past and has suffered 2 fires in its lifetime. This may account for the slightly odd-looking platform buildings which retain their 1940s shape, but with modern features. Outside the station, a picture of the area's industrial landscape continues to be painted, but we're a stone's throw from the Edwardian-era suburbs of Tockington. We arrive at Wembley Central on foot, and it's time for some déjà vu, as I've been here before in the Stanmore episode. Opened in 1842 as Sudbury, Wembley Central has gone through a host of rebuilds in its lifetime and has sported a range of architectural styles. Sadly, though clean enough, the 2008 rebuild is a rather drab affair, and at platform level the station feels a little claustrophobic and dark. This is hindered by the neighbouring 4 platforms on the West Coast Main Line, which can be seen through the gates of the southbound Bakerloo platform. Only 2 of these 4 remain in regular use by a twice-hourly stopping service. Access to these platforms is only granted 5 minutes before departure, as the wind tunnel effect created by the non-stopping Pendolinos rushing under the low roof of the shopping centre above could have quite lethal consequences to anyone without their wits about them. The whole setup therefore gives Wembley Central a rather unwelcoming feel. So at Wembley Central,
arrive at platform 1,
wind it in.
1633 Bakerloo line.
Anyway, we're at Wembley Central, which is kind of, it's a bit, I always feel a bit claustrophobic at this station. It's a bit dark, it's a bit dingy. I mean, it's clean, it's fine, but it's a bit dingy.
It's just got random concrete on
It's got this whole shopping centre above it. Show our lovely viewers what it used to look like. Just a lovely country station.
Yeah.
As we leave Wembley Central, you'll notice the Watford DC line is now running on the opposite side of the West Coast Main Line, with a fly-under after Stonebridge Park facilitating this change. The Watford DC route runs on the London and North Western Railway's new lines, possibly one of the most successful bits of suburban railway planning ever to have taken place in the capital. In 1912, the LNWR's flagship route out of Euston was augmented with 2 new electrified lines. These quite literal new lines would provide the suburban service into the capital from Watford and would be almost completely isolated from the parallel express-running West Coast Main Line services. The independent operation of both the express and local lines allowed for a more reliable suburban service. Up until this point, the intercity route had fairly few calling points, and so with the construction of the new lines, more intermediate stations were provided, like our next stop, North Wembley. This station bears many similarities with Harlesden, and this is no coincidence. The new line stations employed that popular technique we've already seen in previous videos of wholesale standardised designs. As seen here at North Wembley, new line stations sported facing red brick buildings with generous gabled canopies of identical length and spacing. Unfortunately, the waiting rooms and offices that fronted the platforms at most of these stations have long since been bricked up and painted, so the stations have lost some of their original charm. Street-level buildings of the new line stations are generally more modest single-storey affairs, continuing the brick and stone themes. So at the beginning of the video you will have seen I've been quite busy since the last video. Where have you been?
I've done a few actually, because I went to Kensington Olympia.
They come round once every 5 to 10 years, legitimate reasons to go to Kensington
Olympia.
Olympia.
One of them's Walk the Tube,
yes,
which we did, and the other one is going to the Ideal Home Show or anything else that's there. I've been to Holborn because a friend was having a wedding reception in a pub nearby there. I've been to Regent's Park because we went on a picnic, which was nice. Yeah,
You've done quite a few that I haven't been. You did High Street Ken, didn't you?
High Street Ken, yes.
So
I did Leytonstone. I've done a few, but all for legitimate things, and I've done half of Paddington.
I feel like we've entered Metro. Now, this is lovely.
I love the blossom. It's very nice.
This is all north. I don't know what you'd call this, North Wembley, South Kenton. I think in my research, I think this is part of the Sudbury Court estate. Amongst its new line cousins, South Kenton stands out. This station was added in 1935 and therefore didn't get the red brick and painted wood treatment seen elsewhere on the route. Instead, it speaks of the streamlined Art Deco designs of the time. Unusually, the original ticket office stands on the northern end of the island platform, in absence of any street-level buildings. It would have once met footbridges to each side of the Sudbury Court housing estate, but these have been replaced with an underpass. This has led South Kenton to having one of the most depressing and uninspiring entrances of any stations we've seen so far. Nevertheless, it remains a good place to spot the West Coast mainline trains rushing past, as we found out whilst waiting for the next tube.
We're in this curved waiting room, which is quite nice. And as you can hear, fast trains go past. Perfect. And it's just nice to get out of the cold a little bit. It's a little bit cold. It's a weird station, I must admit.
It is a weird station. It's actually quite nicely kept. But
and all the houses leading up to it, lovely. And then suddenly, like Lord of the Rings.
It's a massive pub there.
Yeah, the Wyndham, and it's got really nice old 1930s style architecture, but also Take Courage and all the old signs on it still. And I had to peek through the window, and it does look a really nice boozer actually. We should come back.
Yes. It's a nice station. It's very peaceful, it's very quiet, but the entrance is just so very grim. But this is something we don't tend to do on these trips, is go and have a look at the waiting room. It's so quiet in the waiting room. It sounds noisy because of the echo, but when we stop talking...
It's really clean. You can smell actually paint fumes. I think they've just painted it. I mean, there's a little bit of rubbish left behind by passengers, but actually it's quite a pleasant, well-lit place to sit. Considering we have to wait 8 minutes for the next train, it's not a bad place to wait actually.
We pass Kenton for the time being and head to the end of the line at Harrow and Wealdstone. Except it isn't the end of the line for the Watford DC route, as, well, that continues to Watford. Bakerloo line services were withdrawn as far as Watford Junction in the 1960s, so for now this is as far as we go. Harrow and Wealdstone opened in 1837, which makes it the oldest station on the network to have a tube service. Though the station is 180 years old, it has not surprisingly gone through many changes over the years, and none of the original buildings remain. On the Wealdstone side, the 1912 New Lines building returns us to red brick and stone, but in a much grander scale. The LNWR motif can be seen above the arched windows, and the clock tower offers a prominent municipal feel. The Harrow side is a completely different story. This is a more conventional yellow brick Victorian structure, typical of many suburban London stations. On the eastern side of the station lies the abandoned Platform 7. This would have once hosted the shuttle service to Stanmore Village that we mentioned in episode 3. We jump on the train and head back to Kenton, where we'll do some more filming at Northwick Park for a future episode. It's difficult to spot this station apart from North Wembley. The stations north of Queen's Park are actually owned and managed by Network Rail, if you're wondering why they don't stand up to the normally higher standards of TfL. In fact, this whole route has the feeling of running on a borrowed line. Still, it's time to wave goodbye to the Bakerloo as we head over to tick off a few stations on the Met and ultimately head back into town. So, thoughts on the Bakerloo line? That portion of the northern part of the Bakerloo line?
It was weird because it had sort of bits and pieces that some bits were really nice, and you go, oh, this is quite, there's quite a lot going on here. And then you had other bits that were just like a tunnel, like that one. South Kenton was just like a little pit. I didn't like Willesden Junction very much because I got lost.
That's a nightmare of the station. I didn't realise how much of a nightmare it was.
It took us half an hour to find each other at the same station. So I didn't like that. So I love the trains though, I've got to say. Bakerloo line train is my favourite train. It's just so quirky, and I like it when you sit opposite each other and you're bouncing along, and yeah, that's definitely my favourite train.
It's a really weird stretch of line because I always feel like it's living on borrowed land.
Yeah.
It's not really its own part of the line. It shares it with the Watford DC line and the Overground.
It's so weird when the Overground comes in behind it.
Alongside the West Coast main lines. You've got Pendolinos streaming past. It doesn't really feel like underground. It feels like it's kind of escaped onto the rest of the railway.
I think you captured it really well. It just felt like you were sort of strangers on the network. Like, it didn't feel like, oh, this is just another part of the tube network. It just felt like, it was like going off its own way on somebody else's track.
Yeah. Anyway, you will have noticed that neither of us holding the camera.
No! I'm not here!
You are here!
I'm not here, it's not me. And we're not in a station if you didn't notice.
No, we're in Nando's. Don't forget you can catch up with the whole challenge by heading over to www.callingallstations.co.uk and clicking on the 270, where you can read stories, anecdotes, histories and notes for each station as I visit them, along with more images. You've been with Calling All Stations, and we'll see you at the next stop.
Warren Street, I think, did I go to Warwick? Where did I go? Where's the one if you're walking from Holborn?
Yep.
And
I feel like this is going to be Warren Street over Warwick Avenue, but carry on.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Am I talking about Warren Street or Warwick Avenue?
Warren Street's quite near work.
No, it's not that one then. I'm sure it was one on the Piccadilly line.
Russell Square?
That's the one, Russell Square.
Russell Square.
Yeah, sort of a
I
bit,
haven't done Russell Square.
Yeah,
You've done
Russell
quite a few
Square.
that I haven't been. You did High Street.